Okay, so again, hello everybody. We have Xiao Ji here. She's from Wuhan originally, so she's going to give us some input. How's her situation in Amsterdam, and how does she feel about the whole thing, and some general ideas. And after her input, we can all ask her as many questions as we want. We have no time constraints. I don't think anybody has to go out somewhere soon today, so we are fine. So until there's no questions anymore or she doesn't have any energy, if you have any some questions probably can be answered by Charles too. Is he underneath of me for you guys too?
No.
In my screen, he's underneath Maria.
Okay. Who I'm not going to point to. For me, Charles is here, so in the recording he probably is here too. So if you want to ask something, unmute yourself. For the meantime, I would suggest that everybody mutes themselves. And if you agree with something, you can do this, so to show some agreement. You can also do some fingers, faces, all you want. Yeah. So the stage is yours.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I'm Song Xiaoji, and call me whatever you want. Doesn't matter. I'm here to talk about. So I'm from Wuhan, and I came to Europe since when I was 18, and I'm currently a student of gender and diversity in Germany. And I've been living in Germany and Netherlands for 7 years in total now. Actually, I think what's relevant right now is today, this morning, I already saw that the visa application in the German embassy in China has completely stopped. So you can't do, basically you cannot, if you're in China, you cannot apply to go to Germany again for studying or for working, for whatever. And in US, they also, I think, stopped all the visa services in embassy. And also Italy officially has more deaths than China since yesterday. As someone from Wuhan, I've had a lot of personal experiences that I find might be interesting to share. And I also noticed a lot of asymmetry of information in both China and here. So I think it might be really interesting to discuss some of those stuff that might be useful for everyone to really prepare better for this situation. And the main topic that I would want to cover would be first racism against Chinese people, but that would be or not really Chinese people, basically everyone who has an Asian face. That would be relatively personal part, more about my personal experiences, and then I'm gonna talk about briefly about the situation in Wuhan, how has that influenced me and my family, and how there are many things that I don't know what you guys know or what you guys don't know. I think a lot of people who might participate would be people who are relatively engaged and who have been following the news. But what I see right now is that a lot of people only know that, okay, this most probably originated from Wuhan. That's what current evidence shows, as I don't look at the conspiracy theories. And that's where the first outbreak happens. So, but most of people don't know that why people from Wuhan were traveling everywhere and kind of spreading the disease after this happens, and why it happens in Wuhan, and how much people have left Wuhan since the first case has discovered, and why. And I can briefly talk about that, and also how people in Wuhan respond to that, and what kind of social political impact it might have to the city and to China. And also I want to cover a bit about the symmetry of information. What has been the things that I find that there were a few topics that might be interesting about face mask, about what kind of measures were taking place. And also I find it really interesting why there are certain things that are ignored, there are certain things that are not really communicated, and who we see as an authority off certain type of information, and do we really have to reassess that? And I also think it's impossible it's like important for me to declare that I cannot give any health related advice, and I will not talk about specific things about the virus itself. I feel a bit useless to talk about that right now because it's not that public, but I still, yeah, just to be sure. I'm open to all kinds of questions, but I cannot promise to answer all of them depending on my own energy and how comfortable I am. Um, I remember like in my own family. So if I really talk about like how much I know about this, and I actually Wuhan started lockdown in January, and actually my own family, and I think for a lot of people, we heard something about it in the end of December, when that's when the first case appeared in Wuhan. And until that point on, everyone was still talking about that, how this is not really this is just rumor, this is not really something serious. And even some people who work, for example, for the hospital, some people who work for some of my family working pharmaceutical industry, so even they've heard about things, they would be like, if the government still is ordering everyone to not talk about it, if government is, because the whole idea is that the government didn't want to know about it, didn't want people to know about it, because the government doesn't want to spread the panic, doesn't want the panic to create a bigger chaos than the disease itself. And when the government is ordering people to be silent, people kind of, even for people who know about it, you feel like maybe this is not that big, maybe this is under control. And we all know that because of the long history that that we got a bit of like lack of transparency, and there are many things probably happens without the public knowing about it. And I think a lot of people just kind of take that for granted. That's why for even people who know about it, not everyone choose to tell that to other people, and still thought things are under control. Also, that was what we heard, that the government, like the officials from the government, they keep saying that things are still under control, things are all fine. And even when we probably already have the evidence that it might go from human to human, what they are claiming, like, we're still like openly like, this doesn't go from human to human. So a lot of people, the general public in Wuhan and in China, don't know about how serious this is, which is actually different compared to the situation right now, because I think if people here would like to check more on news, would like to really search on Google, they would find that how serious this is, but people still choose to ignore that. And like, since this has drastically changed my life, because when Wuhan first got into lockdown, they didn't really have a lot of like accompanying method that like really kind of like make sure that the city will be still functioning. And in the beginning, no one knows where we can get food. No one knows for how long the supermarket will still be open. And my families, they were at home. And also, it was like in the first 2 days, it was still possible to go back to Wuhan for people who are from Wuhan who live abroad, or who live like in different cities. But basically, after a few days, it was completely like not possible to to go back to Wuhan. And because I've been really worried that if my family got infected, I'm their only child, and if I need to go, and both of my family, they live alone. And I was thinking if I should go back to China to take care of them if anything happens. And then I realized that it is not possible. I have family that were stuck in Japan at that time for a business trip, and she wanted to come back, and it was really hard. And I have like my dad's best friend, he was stuck somewhere in Beijing with his family. And yeah, they don't want to, like, the hotels don't want to take people who have a Hubei or Wuhan like ID card. So they almost went homeless, and they have to call so many people to find one hotel that would like to take them. It was winter and really cold. They were with the kids, so they were just it was quite hard for me in the beginning to really deal with the situation, and also more about like how the lack of transparency um, makes people like kind of like makes people don't really have the trust in what the officials say anymore. And there were many rumors like that were being sent out in the internet, and a lot of people were blaming on the people who were spreading the panic and spreading the rumors. But for me, I just really can't I can't blame people who do that, because it's because of the lack of transparency, the lack of access to information that make people panic to believing things that they cannot in any way verify. Um, and also, like, I remember in the beginning of January was also really hard as a relatively, like, I'm a liberal leaning Chinese person. Like, I have, let's say, different political stance than a lot of my Chinese friends. They're really nice and kind people, but we have some fundamental differences when we are discussing things about social political issues. And um, like, I remember I was trying to tell some of the people in my university that things were not going on that well, and I think when they want to go back home for Spring Festival, they should be careful. They should be yeah, just don't really be trust them when they're saying that everything's under control. And actually, like, someone who is in the video chat right now, like, she knows the whole process, that how I was fighting with a lot of Chinese students in the group chat, because I told them to, yeah, be careful. Basically, I didn't even directly address anything, but some people think I'm spreading panic, and some people think yeah, some people think I'm kind of discrediting our government and our country. And then there were people go into like my timeline of the post that I posted and talking about, and they were like checking my post about also about Hong Kong, about what I posted about Hong Kong, and we're like, oh, she's very political correct, like incorrect the whole time, like she's, yeah. So it was a very stressful situation for a long time. And this whole situation, like, I don't really feel like my hometown is a safe place to live anymore, because we don't know at any moment something will change, or if they're gonna be there were also some discussion about protests, and maybe we should do something about, we should hold the government accountable for what they did. Okay, I think this might be not something I'm supposed to say. Anyway, yeah, yeah, including me, like, some of my friends, and we were posting a lot of stuff about how people were searching for help, and how we should hold certain people accountable for what's the tragedy that's going on in Wuhan. And yeah, when we were posting about those kind of stuff, we, like, some of my friends' posts got deleted, my post got deleted, and some of my friends got like their account got deleted. I forgot what I want to talk about. Oh, yeah. And but in the same time, I also, because I cannot go back to China, I cannot go back to Wuhan at that point on. I like, I was really thinking about where because this is influencing my future, and because I have to apply for university this year, and I was thinking about not staying in Germany, but now I really have to stay in Germany. There were a lot of changes, and then yeah, and then and then I realized it's not only not safe in Wuhan, but also it was okay in the beginning, that when things in Wuhan were not still okay here. And I was talking with quite some of my friends about this whole situation, about how serious is the whole thing, and it might spread to Europe also, and how what kind of measures that might be important, because there are many people who come from China to here for trade fair, for working, for studying all the time. And this was Spring Festival, Chinese students will come and go. And most of the people I talk to who I think might be in high risk group, they don't really care that much, because there was this understanding. And even I admit that I myself have the same thought, that I feel like if the similar thing happens in under maybe a different system, things will be different. Um, Things won't go that serious. And I have believed in, like, I feel like maybe this has a lot to do with how our system function. And yeah, and I think that's a lot of my friends think that the same thing wouldn't happen in Europe. um yeah, and then, as we all know, things spread in Europe. We also see a lot of problems going on here. And then that was when things get even harder for me personally, because I got many racist comments in the street in Germany. So far, it's been 5 times. The first 4 times I was fine with it. It's like, like, when I don't know how things in different places, but like when I was living in North Rhine-Westphalia, and it's always the thing that if I'm in like some bigger city, Cologne, Düsseldorf, well, right now I live in Essen, like I walk around, there are gonna be people like ni hao, and then ching chen chong, and then people would be like konnichiwa, this kind of stuff. I usually would talk back to them, and I think it's very disrespectful, but I generally think that's harmless, because they were usually just teenagers who were basically, they are showing you that, hey, you're Asian, you look different, I see you, and it's really bad, but still, I don't feel that unsafe about it. But in the recent time, like, I see more and more news about how Asian people being harassed and basically physically assaulted everywhere around the world. There was actually a Wikipedia page listed all the xenophobia and racism related to coronavirus pandemic, and it was listed all the media covered incident, and there were many even in Germany and Netherlands. And it's been 4 times that there were random teenagers coming to me on the street and be like, oh, corona times, oh. And some were joking and laughing, and some were not. And every time I'm a bit scared, because I see all the possible violence follow after that. So I didn't talk back to them as I always would do. I just ran away. And until the 5th time, it was in the Netherlands. That was a time that I actually start to feel like it's very unsafe to leave home, because I was in Amsterdam, it was in Albert Heijn, in the city center. And I could never imagine something like that would happen in Netherlands, and in a city center of such an international and diverse city. And there were 2 Dutch girls they were not even teenagers, they were at my age, and they were just acting like, oh, I look like I'm like a virus, they have to back up, and they were making fun of it, and they think it's so funny, and they didn't know that I was looking at them. And I actually saw the whole thing while I was staring at food, but like I was only halfway looking at them. And then I turned back and I stared at them, and they immediately realized that I saw the whole thing. They were embarrassed, and they just ran away before I got to react anything. And also because of this whole Chinese virus thing, that when Trump brought it out, and I saw, like, just after Trump said that, there were more and more racist attack. That was not really verified information. I just saw it on Twitter that a lot of Asian American were getting harassed, and there were a lot of violence also. Yeah. And it's just, for me, it's just a really hard situation that I just talked with my family this morning, that they were still not sure if they think I should go back home, even though right now it's actually not possible anymore. A lot of my Chinese friends have gone back home. Didan told me yesterday that not everyone knows about that. I actually thought it was a lot of people know about that, but I guess not everyone knows about that. I work in a bubble tea shop, and a lot of people that I work with, they already decided to fly back to China immediately because they think China is safer at the moment. And I have I can't fully agree with that, but also because I'm from Wuhan, so it's a different situation in Wuhan compared to other cities in China. Um, and also because like I was posting a lot of stuff, and I just kind of feel like right now that as someone who is who like talk about this kind of stuff openly, and who I feel like it's been 6 or 7 years, and I already feel like here is my home, and I feel more comfortable here in a way. But um, this will never be my home because I look Asian, and but going back home would be an even harder choice, even though my families are there, because of what's going on in Wuhan. Things also, I don't know how things gonna go. Yeah, and I think, yeah, I will move on to like the lessons, like the, so like I think for a lot of Chinese people, or actually like just um, Asian people in general, who have the thing hitting our country earlier. Um, for us, like I think a lot of people have really like also like really like PTSD to witness the same thing going on here. And um, just in Wuhan, like Wuhan was this kind of, oh yeah, I'm gonna talk a little bit about Wuhan. Like Wuhan is a huge city that even people here don't know about. It's a city of punk music in China. I'm really proud of that. It's also a city where the Xinhai Revolution started. And it's also a city, it's really a city of revolution for me, that we learned a lot about it when we grow up. But the thing is just right now, like a lot of people were, even this thing, when this thing first happened, as someone from Wuhan, it's not only I don't feel safe about the racism here, but also if I go back to China, I would face similar or even more extreme discrimination on many levels, because I have a ID from Wuhan. I was always on Weibo, the Chinese Twitter kind of thing, and there were so many people in the beginning blaming and redirecting their anger towards people on Wuhan for the situation in China, or for the whole coronavirus situation. Um, the thing is, Wuhan is, as first thing is that I said that a lot of people in Wuhan don't actually know about the situation when they only listen to the government, the official, and what they said. Secondly is that Wuhan is a huge city that is located in the central part of China, and we have a Chinese term for that called 九省通衢. Wuhan is a place that a lot of trains and all different. It's like a transportation hub, like and because it's also the capital city of Hubei province. We have a lot of people who are not from Wuhan who work in Wuhan. So in total, we have, I think, including documented and undocumented people, we have 14 million people, 1-4. I'm not sure if I pronounced it right. And um, during Spring Festival, before the lockdown of Wuhan, 5 million people left Wuhan before the lockdown. That was all under like I think majority of them left because Spring Festival, planned vacation, visiting family, going back home, already planned trip, this kind of stuff. And there was a small group of people, definitely is because that they know that they already heard that the medical, like the healthcare system is collapsing, and they probably have a better chance of surviving in any other places other than Wuhan. That is not just limited to people who think that they might have coronavirus. And they were right, because our healthcare system collapsed. And what's going on in Wuhan is not just people who have coronavirus cannot, or COVID-19 cannot get treatment, cannot get a place for care. It's also a lot of people who have chronic illness, who have cancer, who have different kinds of issues that, or people who have mental health issues that need to take medication. They can't get their medication. They can't go to hospital because we are all understaffed and we don't have enough people. And even for people who have COVID-19, there are already not enough space for that. And yeah, so this, like, the situation right now is just so that's why that this thing would spread this far in China and spread this far in the whole world. And I see people in China redirecting their anger towards people from Wuhan, because I don't know, but my assumption is that they do not dare to be angry at the people they actually should be angry at. And it's the same here, that people were projecting their fear and their anger or their disagreement with government towards the people who were also the victim of this whole situation. So I'm not saying like who would be put on the blame for that. It's just that I think there was so much asymmetry of information that really can be prevented by people communicating more and really discussing openly about what we can do in the situation as a citizen and what we can do to urge the people who can really make a change in the government to make some change. And yeah, and what other topic I was trying to talk about? I don't even know how long has this been. Any question for now? I haven't talked about the topic about measures in Wuhan or more practical issues and asymmetry of information, but is there any questions? I can't hear anyone.
Yeah, I didn't say anything yet. My question would be like, so I saw these pictures of like the temporary hospital closing.
Yeah.
And you said at the same time, you said there's not enough staff and facilities. So like, why did they close a temporary hospital? Do you have like a speculation? Did they close all temporary hospitals?
Actually, right now, that's the case, because what I was talking about is more like the situation in the last 2 months after the lockdown. And actually, even before the lockdown, things has already been kind of bad, and they just didn't take effective measure early enough to really, so when they did the lockdown, it was kind of already quite late. Right now, I think it was yesterday or the day before that the official number for the first time is 0. And I don't really know if that's true or not. And I know this question might come, and I saw a lot of discussion about this, and I have nowhere to know. And I really hope it's real. And I think it might be, because they were really like the measures that were taking place in Wuhan. I mean, the things were bad, but you see changes every day, but you also see improvement. You also see that how when you raise your voice and how when you keep claiming for what you think should be done, you see that actually working, and things were really getting better in the last few weeks from what I know with my families and friends in Wuhan. So they are closing it because things were actually getting better and we were actually making progress. But I'm still a bit skeptical about the whole claiming the victory and claiming all the success right now, and how our country did such a great job, and everything was great, and we win this war. I'm very skeptical about this current like what people were talking about. Just I don't know if that's because there were also a lot of discussion like how this might come back when the lockdown when they stop the lockdown. So I don't think we know enough to say that. Yeah.
Like, and then I have like a follow-up question. So, given that, like, how do you think, like, why do we not learn? Like, everybody kind of, the whole world watched Wuhan and, like, watched what they did. And then, like, similar thing happened to Italy. And then we still haven't learned, right? I just saw a picture of Florida with a full beach, like, everybody's super close. So, do you have an idea why we don't want to learn from this? Do you think it has something to do with racism? Like, if there was a different country, because there's lots of Asian countries that have coped with it. Like, Hong Kong had like 100 cases, I think. Taiwan was really doing well until somebody went to a church. Hong Kong has 3 cases left. I just did 300, 200, something like that. But like for such a close proximity, it's like ridiculously low, right? And then also there's other Asian countries that are doing really well because everybody's. And do you think it's like Western arrogance? And like, what's your perspectives? Like, why are we so stupid not to want, not willing to learn? Like, is it the measures we don't want to take? Like, what's your take on that?
Like there were many things that are interesting. Like there was one of the things that I discussed earlier. Like I was posting something about it. This was my main point actually, that I really wonder like why like as you said that the whole world's watching what's going on in Wuhan. That's what I thought until I realized that's not really the case. There were media coverage about it, but there were also people who generally don't give a fuck, sorry for my language, who generally don't, yeah, whatever, who generally just don't care about news. People don't watch news that much, and people don't care about what's going on in a country that is so foreign, has a different political system, that is so far away, and it's a country that was portrayed so evil by the media here. And I'm like, this kind of take on it, it's in a way like it's understandable that people think it's irrelevant, and I'm not like, I understand that, but also I think if the general public don't know about it and don't listen and don't really care, that's still something to many extent I understand. But like I don't get like why the health officials and why like the government here were not really following up on what's going on. We're not doing enough research about what's going on. And the second thing is like why they were, I read a article a few days ago about how the propaganda is not, yeah, like how the whole thing about face mask backfired. That a lot of people, like there were this whole discussion, I think even until now, that if it's necessary to wear it and how effective is it. And there were so much things that the government, even after things get serious here, were not communicating clear enough to the public, that like in like people would people, like if they don't see social media, they don't want to read the news, then people would at least like go to the website of government to see what would be the recommended information, or like what would be recommended measures in personal level that were like kind of verified by official, because people here really, like people trust the information that were put there. And they were like, I remember that about face masks, that I talked with a close friend, that I told him that I wouldn't say it's 100% effective, and I know why people say it doesn't work, because it doesn't protect your eyes, and you probably have to touch your face because you want to adjust your mask. But still, it blocks the droplet. It's the same like if you use something out to cover it, you are basically covering it, and you are lowering the chance. And we don't have enough evidence to say that it definitely doesn't work or even makes things worse. While and I think, when we don't have enough scientific evidence to say what works and what doesn't, and then just people should present it as the way it is. And but then the people, like the officials here, were claiming that it's really not useful and not advised without any sources to back that up. And then people buy into that, but then later they will be like, oh, we don't have enough face mask. Our doctors and nurses need face mask. And then there was this contradiction. Then the same friend that I was talking to, he was like, hey, but like if it's not working, like why the doctors and nurses need it? And it's just that, like, one assumption I saw is that there were not enough face masks and protective gears here available here because of many, many reasons. And here in Netherlands right now, it is actually advised, if you have purchased some, if you have some, you should donate it to the healthcare workers, which I agree. But just, I think, be honest about it. Be honest about what this is for and how useful it is, and what you should do about it. Maybe give it to healthcare worker is more useful for you, and that's why we advise you to not wear it, instead of saying that this is not useful, this is all bullshit. And I think they were also about things like that. I think in January we already know that even if you show no symptoms or mild symptoms, it is still contagious. And that information, for some reason, is just not communicated well. And a lot of people just don't know about it. And in Germany, they are having Corona parties everywhere. And just,
So are you disappointed by your second home? Like, are you disappointed how it unfolds? Does it take you by
the whole
surprise?
world. Yes.
Yes,
I'm so disappointed. Honestly, I'm so disappointed, and I'm disappointed by the whole world. No, but I think there are a lot of nice people, and I actually think Germany is not doing that bad right now. And I also see people having more awareness. But there was another thing that might be something that it's really personal observation, and I don't know if that's true, that I really feel very strongly about the American culture influence this time, that when China has, like about whole social distancing, flatten the curve, when China, when like people generally from Asia were talking about it, like, no, I don't see a lot of people reacting to that. And then Italy, I don't see people reacting to that as much. And then it's becoming more and more of a major topic in US. And like all the Americans are talking about, all the like highly educated Americans, well-informed Americans, like, oh, we should flatten the curve, social distancing. Then I suddenly see so much more people caring more about this. But maybe it's just because my timeline is just with certain type of people that I would hang out with.
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, but democracy doesn't produce very competent leaders either. So if you look at the German health ministry, and like at other German officials, I would say, like, except Merkel, right? She's super smart, but there's so many people that are really incompetent, because it's about voting in is about like who other people think that they can do the job, right? It's not about you're qualified. It's a little bit like now we have a crisis situation. So we have an airplane, and then we vote who's going to fly the airplane instead of picking the pilot. So if you just vote for who you think looks the most competent to fly the pilot, it doesn't necessarily produce the best outcome. So yeah, the grass is always greener on the other side. But in a sense, like, I think this is like, because democracy is always praised as a system that has like really, really good leadership, because people vote, right? People vote, people are free. But just having a fair process, which is everybody votes, doesn't mean there's a good outcome. So like, we have to divide the process of electing a leader.
Yes.
That's fair, but it doesn't mean that, you know, the Minister of Health particularly knows anything. Like, he has been in trouble for like years over that we are missing 100,000 healthcare workers, right? The German system really misses healthcare workers, and therefore, regarding this, the healthcare worker, like how many health facilities there are. Sophie is asking, in the US, part of the problem they have in dealing with the virus is that healthcare is not financially accessible to many people. And that
Yes.
many people can't afford to stay home when they're sick because their wages are so low. How is it in China? Is the healthcare system financially accessible to everybody? Well, I would answer, well, it's communist, right?
Well, yeah, like, yeah, that's, the thing is that I can talk about it from my experience, but it wouldn't be that, I wouldn't think it applied to majority of people in China, because I think Chinese people who can afford to live abroad and who have the, like, yeah, who have the chance to receive that kind of education I would receive, is very, very, like, it's the minority. And for my family, it's been okay. And when it comes to specifically COVID-19, that if you have insurance in China, like, basically, if you have it in China, then you got, like, all the money will be paid by the government, so you don't have to pay it. But what I heard recently is that because there was a huge amount of international students going back home, and there was a lot of criticism in China about the Chinese people who are going home for some mysterious reason, and they released some kind of statement and saying that, like, if you, like, live abroad and you go home and you have to pay a lot of stuff by yourself. But I don't know, like, what's the actual base for that, because, like, the thing with discussing about some systems or certain policies in China is that you have so much space to modify it, or like you have so much space to find connection or some tricks to go to, yeah, I don't know, yeah, so it's kind of really, in my life it has been okay, that I never have trouble with that. And but I know that there are going to be people who don't have the insurance that were paid by their company, or don't get a job, and then, yeah, it was pretty bad. But in terms of COVID-19, the government is paying everything. That is different in US in this time.
I have a question. I'll change the subject, but I just read from a headline that Bavaria becomes first German state to impose a lockdown. Do you think that people will judge this decision differently by being imposed by a democratic and Western politicians, or do you think that it will be judged I don't know, like, what are your thoughts about it? Because I guess the lockdown was inspired by the situation in Wuhan.
I got what you mean, and I think people who disagree with this kind of decision will disagree. Like, actually, yesterday I was talking with Sophie, and Sophie was saying that if the same kind of measure that happened in China happens here, it will be harder because people are less likely to comply because people care about their personal freedom, and which in many ways I also understand, and I heard that. So when in Italy started with the lockdown, there were people who going on street to protest about that. I agree with protesting, but not on street and not in groups, and they actually did that. So yeah, I wanted to say something else, but oh yes, I think also one thing about like how to implement this kind of things is that I think people would still disagree, but I think it's also because that a lot of people, I think they don't have the kind of collective traumatic experiences as people who are from mainland China or Hong Kong, or when you have seen what government can do, what government would not be shy to do, and I think a lot of young people who grow up in Germany and Netherlands have trouble imagine the situation because it's really, they haven't experienced that and they don't understand why we would be like self-censoring what we were talking about, and why people would just comply whatever that was given to them.
I think you're right. By the way, to answer, I think I can answer the question kind of, because my area of expertise is democracy, right? Democracy and autocracy and political systems. So I watched people talking about Wuhan online, be like, oh no, they do lockdown and all the freedoms have been taken away. And then when it happened to Italy, I didn't see that. Okay, so I could already see that when it was in China, they were like, oh my God, this is so harsh. But when it came to Italy, I didn't see all those things. And the whole time I was like, wait, quarantine is a normal thing. I have a book by a law expert, and she talks about taking personal freedoms for the common good. And for me, this is like a little bit also the case where you can see, which is a very crude saying to say, but Jonas is actually also a PhD in anthropology next to me. But it's really cool, so don't listen, Jonas. So there's the idea that there's collectivist and individualist countries. So collectivists are the ones, right, that are like more about common goods, and there's like always this different like pictures where people are like all standing like next to each other, or people are standing in like a big large circle, right? So like the circle would be the collectivist culture, and the others would be like the individualist culture. And it's like really crude books that use this explanation, like between Asian cultures and like European cultures, for instance. And they are like, I would say Italy might like even be like in between, like more of a mixed. Obviously, there's no pure things. So would you agree, like now that you watch this, that a collectivist culture, like this kind of attitude, is like way better prepared to handle something like a pandemic? That is like actually where you have to like look out for others and not just for yourself.
Are you asking me?
Would you agree? I mean, everybody else can answer too. Like maybe Charles can answer too. Like if like, yeah. Also Hong Kong is kind of like a hybrid, right? So would you agree that like this collectivist culture are like way better with coping with this situation?
Wait, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Charles. So you mean collectively, like people in general have their own decision to decide what to do, and the whole community actually doing the same? Is that what you mean?
No, I meant like the idea that the cultures are different, that like we are very like individualistic, individual freedom cultures that are like really like, this is my right to, like, which we also see with like driving, right? In that sense, like Germany is really individualistic. Like, oh, my freedom to drive as fast as I want is like more important than pollution or people dying from car accidents. That people are like so insistent on their personal freedoms, while Asian cultures are said to be like more collectivistic, more oriented towards like the whole community. Like, do you think that's why Asian countries are doing better?
I think so. To talk about this, I also have some discussion with friends because in Western society, individual rights, individual freedom are granted, and now if government want to take away this, it will be harder. And in China or in Hong Kong, is a base that they have the absolute power of everything, and which in some situation like a pandemic situation, they can do a lot of abrupt changes to take away freedoms from people in order to react so fast. If the like the one in power, they are doing the right thing, I think it's actually very fast to stop the spreading. And I also want to add point because I'm from Hong Kong, and in Hong Kong, in the very beginning, it's actually so interesting because the government actually tell people not to wear a mask in the very beginning of the coronavirus. But as the same thing, because Hong Kong people get used to hear all the kind of you can say lies, or the statement from government is not really reliable. So every individual have their decision to make. So to make it more worse, because everyone is scared about skeptical about what the government is actually saying. So people are doing more about the themselves personally, in terms of like maybe wearing mask or getting hygiene stuff, which is you can say it's not a trust in the government. But compared to the Western society, I see a lot of people really trust the government, trust the authority to just waiting for their action. And in this point, it's actually quite late because in pandemic spread so fast, and you can say we're overreacting, or maybe we are having some fear on it. But in this situation, you can see the number from maybe I'm not talking about China, maybe Taiwan and Hong Kong. They are also doing quite well in this situation. Yeah.
Like another thing, like I really agree with Charles about that. I'm surprised by how much people just wait for the government to deal with the situation. Because what you said, like I agree with that, this collective culture and individual culture, like individualist culture, like really influence how people react to it, in a sense that I think people here, like in general, people here think that like people here are more politically engaged from what I see before the pandemic, actually, that I always have this impression that everyone here feel like they should take all, like, well, like what's go with the personal freedom is also the personal responsibility. I remember that I actually read an article about like for people who are in different European countries, like what do people think is the most effective measures when it comes to climate change. And a lot of people who are in Western Europe, like specifically Netherlands and Germany, people here, they think they should like the individual lifestyle change would be a most effective measure. While I think a lot of people who are from a country or a culture that is has more collective culture think that it's a government regulation or technology advancement that would make more change. And I always have the observation here that I think people here really think that well, I have the personal freedom, I really care about that, but I also want to take more responsibility. Like that's all comes with like a lot of things that I don't see people do in China. That I like. It's a matter also about like how much power the government has. When the government has a lot of power over the people, then the government also would take more responsibility in terms of things. That when I was in China, that a lot of people's general like understanding about politics is that politics is something that for people who are higher up, for people who are powerful, for people who have certain position, and this politics is not something that is for me as a normal person, as an individual. And here people don't think that way. But in the same time, I also see that I was talking with people today about communal effort that I can see in Wuhan and here, that I see a lot of communal effort that is happening here. That in Germany we have the neighborhood helping group that I see that people are organizing in Kleve and in many other cities to help with the people. But I also see the same thing in Wuhan, that we were talking like, so there was a post about how in the beginning of the lockdown, it's like when you just look online, you feel like, is this an anarchist state? Because everything was relying on volunteers and the people who are self-organizing things to help around with each other. And that was forced, of course, because that was all we got at that time. On the one side, I think it's probably it's true that this really influenced people's response to this kind of stuff. But I also see that in the pandemic, a lot of things that we know about culture has changed or has been more blurry, or like the boundaries have really been changed.
And I think I'm reminded, based on experience in West Africa, another reason that could exist why non-Western cultures are more effective in dealing with these kind of outbreaks sometimes is because they have more historical memories of similar situations, similar epidemics. I think, you know, for example, I just looked this up. China has a lot of still tuberculosis cases and so on. And I think if there's some collective memory of how dangerous these things can be, the response will be more prompt too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also saw someone talking about like how for people who are from certain countries, that they think that like all the things, like a lot of measures that people are doing right now in Europe, that were like, oh my God, what is going on here? You know, when you have canned food, when you have to disinfect everything, when you have to wear masks, and when you have to deal with the fear, and when you have to deal with the fear of like what's coming next in the following days. And some people from developing countries, or from countries that generally just have different living condition than like Europe and US, where people were just better adapted to it, because it's also a time that you realize that like so many people in so many countries have been in survival mode for their whole life. And I think a lot of people in Western society, especially like people who are like my generation, they have never experienced that. Those are the things that they've only seen in history books, so they don't know what's going on, they don't know how to deal with it.
I actually saw a post that was making fun, that said, you know, our grandparents' generation, they had to go to war, you know, they went to war. And now we just have to stay at home. And then it was like, so hashtag, so stay the fuck home. And I think, for me, it's like, I find it like really interesting. Obviously, it's kind of like supporting my studies, like the reaction. So how it's going, how people are fighting for some freedoms they should not have. Like that, you should not have the freedom to stand next to somebody in a crowded place, right? Like if if you don't like, the understanding is that freedom is an absolute right, and there is no absolute rights, right? Like everything is in relation, like it has a trade-off. If we keep those bars and parties open, yes, we will be a freer society in one sense, but in the other sense, we will be not free of the virus, so we will be much more enslaved. And I think it's really hard to understand for many people. They have like this really, really high notion of some absolute freedom, and they don't understand that freedom never comes as like a pure absolute thing. And yeah, and that we are going to like, yeah, that there's millions of people gonna die if I fight for this freedom to just mingle everywhere. Do we have any other questions? We really fried you so far. I'm like, so no questions anymore, because like
no.
we
My
already
internet
talked
kind
with
of.
her. Huh? I have one. Okay, tell us. Yeah, we are. So I already want to say thank you so much. Probably I'm speaking for all of us. It's really cool to hear all of this, and it's so interesting. And thank you that you're taking all that time. So we're all waiting for Sophie. Or Sophie wants to talk?
Oh, wait, I see that Charles
Okay.
had an early question.
Charles asked, but you answered. If you know somebody in Wuhan, I guess, know somebody in Wuhan who has COVID? Or just, she has a whole family in Wuhan.
Oh, me?
She's from Wuhan.
I'm from there, and all my family and half of my friends are there. And yeah.
So Sophie asked, what can we do to combat the racism that Asian people are facing? That's a very good question. Actually, while you were talking, I was already writing down, and this made me really, really sad, and probably everybody else too. She said, this will never be my home because I look Asian. Like, I don't know, I see at least 3 Germans here. I think like maybe Caro also, for me it makes me like cry, like it makes me super, super sad to hear that. But yeah, like what are we gonna do to combat racism? Yeah, and it says, I know that social media seems not to be enough. So yeah, it would be lovely to hear your take on that.
No idea. Like the thing is, I study gender and diversity. So is Maria and Sophie, and the whole thing that we like, our whole study. I think a lot of people who are in our study was also like the aim of our study is to really try to create a more open and diverse society. And this is still something I've been thinking. Like, actually, I saw this coming, but I didn't even put it in the document I prepared earlier because I just don't have an answer for that. That I see a lot of like, I think that's maybe just very like personal thing that for me that I don't see. I find a lot of theories we learn really interesting, but I don't see a lot of approach that we learned in our study would be really useful in my situation when I study this, because I interested in how to do certain kind of social intervention in a different political context than here. Well, most of the things we learned about was about a very different history, and I had many discussion with friends lately about that. When we live under a society that is like, yeah, like this, like how we're gonna raise our voice, like in China or here, like I don't know, like when I'm in China, like I think I want to go into, I want to know more about media and technology and how it can maybe create social change, but that's a future thing and I still don't know. And maybe and racism, no idea. I have no idea. Yeah, but maybe like
There is there's this which I'm not fond of. There's this organization called DXE, Direct Action Everywhere, and they're focusing on animal rights, but they do for the yearly dog festival, they do a thing that is called Yuling is Everywhere, and it's like combating the idea that eating dogs is somehow barbaric, but eating pigs is not. So they call it Yuling is Everywhere because like it doesn't matter, right? If it's in a factory a pig or if it's a dog, it's like all the same. And I think like there's statistics that show that racism is like mostly there where people don't know other people. So number one is intermingle with those people, because most people, yeah, like we are humans, we are scared of that what we don't know. So like most votes for racist parties in Germany are also those areas that have least foreigners. So I think that's a thing, like mingle. And I also think like what's really important is like never let it slip anywhere. Like racism is not something you just let go. Like we had this I hate China thing as our post, right? And I showed you all those wonderful taste posts underneath. So there were like, I don't know, there were 100 comments that said, this is racist bullshit. And they were like even insulting the person that posted it and so on. So I think it's really important that anytime we see something racist, we have to like be a voice. Independent, I mean, it's really hard if it like affects yourself. Like I look really international, so it normally doesn't happen to me by my face. But yeah, it's harder, but we have to like say I think we have to, every time we see something, we don't have to be like, oh, this is just Facebook or something. We have to like comment and say this is not okay, because there's all these other people that if nobody says anything, at one point it becomes a new normal and it becomes okay. But then on the back hand, I think what we also should look at is that demographically, at least in Germany, we already won against the right wing. Like we foreigners, we are way better at reproduction. We have way more kids. So I just hope eventually in 20 years, the AfD cannot get more than 10% because there are no more than 10% of the voting population, right? It's really sad to see it in this way, but I think there's some hope also when you look at all the teenagers, like, you know, like all those K-pop bands that are like globally #1. They're not like #1 in Asia anymore. They're like went global. So I have a lot of hope actually this time in the future generation when it comes to like not being racist. So I think globalization did a lot of like good that we shouldn't like try. That's the part Corona should not destroy. I'm okay with Corona destroying capitalism. So yeah, like anybody else wants to answer this, by the way, like I would love maybe Maria or like Jonas, because it's like it's a general question, like what are we gonna do? Like I'm really pissed off if I see all this China hate, but in general we have a racism problem everywhere in the world. So if anybody has like a general answer, or maybe like an anecdote or like something, please.
I think I have a hint for the people. Usually when you are the target of racism, you are not in the place, or you don't have the energies to be always fighting with trolls in internet, or to be always telling people like, hey, that was racist actually. And I don't know, because it's like it's going against you and you as a person. But people who have privileges, or people who are Western or white, they should be also contributing to spread the word by intervening in some chats, because racism is so daily. Like we see it everywhere. Like we just don't see it only in YouTube or in social media. We see it in all our conversations on the table with our parents, with our grandparents. Like we all can just start a conversation about it. Like, hey, you know, I actually have Asian friends. I actually just Skyped with an amazing girl from Wuhan who told me this and this and that. Did you know about that? And they will be like, oh no, of course no, because I don't know any Chinese people. So I don't know, like I would just bring it to the conversation more and raise awareness by just sharing what you know, sharing that you actually know people that come from these places where they apparently are barbaric, but they are not. So I would just like go for that. And yeah, like if you have privileges, use them and be our allies, because we don't have the energies always.
Yes, he's also for it. Animal cruelty on live. No, we are not live anywhere. We are just recording. Yes. So is there? I see there's something else. Oh yeah, I really like that action too. You're talking about the marathon also?
Huh?
Yeah, there's an organization that has Hilf. For every hate comment, they donate €1 to an anti-hate organization. And there was this really nice thing I also really liked. So there was this German town, and they had trouble with every year there were the races, like really Nazis, okay? Like not many, maybe 200, 1,000, whatever, but they came to this town because some famous Nazi leader was born there, or I don't remember why. But what they did is they made a marathon out of it. So where they used the whole course, and for every kilometer, every Nazi went, there was like they were collecting money. So they got some organizations before, so they would even get more money if there's more Nazis. And they were writing it everywhere, and they were even putting a table with bananas, like a real marathon. So you know, there's like this donation thing where you run for cancer. So basically those races that were demonstrating for racism, at the same time they were by just walking, they were donating to all these organizations, for example, Exit, that helps people to get out of this. So that would be a really creative thing. I really like the thing with hate comment, €1 too, but how rich, who's the donor? Like who's like, that must be millions. What's happening there? Yeah. So okay, so do we have any other questions in general? Otherwise I would close the recording and then we can just freely chat.
I just have one last comment about like,
Yeah,
I've been here without camera, but yeah, because I think that we understand that racism is something very linked to our identities, and then sometimes you can say call it out, but that can backfire in terms of people protecting themselves. But I think that we need to do many things. Sometimes we need to call it out. We need to, go to use social media to maybe not directly talk to that person, but to say, like, it's not okay as you did what you wrote. It really, I think it is one of the strategies as well. And to say, this is not okay. Because many times, like, people don't even realize that's racist, And I think with social media, we have the opportunity to create kind of a safe space in a way where you can, post questions in terms of like, maybe some attitudes that people have, like not going to the Chinese restaurant, you can phrase it the other way around. So if this wasn't Corona and it was like when people from Germany, do you think people would react in this way? Creating fake scenarios in like different contexts and can help people to have this aha moments of like, oh wow, I didn't realize, because it happens a lot. Like I experienced a lot of racism in Germany, and I would never ever expected that was going to happen to me. And even with situations of sexual harassment, and then when you talk to my, some friends here, they say, well, they probably were foreign people, not Germans, the ones that sexually harass you. And then I realized, do you realize this is what you're saying, right? And I think we can use social media to create spaces like this one to talk about. We can post things. We can create spaces where we can rethink ourselves, because I think this is a really good opportunity to also understand that we are full of biases, And I know it's not going to be a perfect world, and it's going to be extra work to do, not only regarding Asian people, but I think it's a really good example that Corona, it's beyond, a virus. It's Corona is showing how much xenophobia there is present, how much racism there is present, how many things are broken in our system. And I think we should be grateful for that, because now we can show it to people and say, look, this happened. So what do we do from here? So just to say that, because I feel that we have a lot of activism to do, from social media to other spaces. But for now, I think this is the platform we have. Yeah. And thank you for doing this.
So I have a short comment too. Like, didn't want to say the person that is like affected by racism is supposed to stand up always. I try to disclaim it, but everybody else who is privileged should have the duty to always, like, coming with the privilege to be not a victim, by like structural victim. You should have a duty to always speak up. Like, not just like, so don't let it slip. Like, if you are in the privileged position, never let it slip. I have another question from Axel, whose mic doesn't work. So is there a cultural difference about how many people think that losing some sick and elderly people isn't that bad? This is discussed in the public for obvious reasons, but I would be surprised if this, though, didn't cross the mind of some people. Like the whole thing about boomer removal, right? It's like American hashtag. Yeah, like I'm gonna come back to racism in a second again, but yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't thought about that. Like now we have multiple people, like we have somebody from Bolivia, we have somebody from China, from Hong Kong. So is it the same? Is there like also some kind of an attitude? I mean, I know Confucius said you should like really honor your parents and so on. So there's a different tradition. So, but is there voices that say, who cares? It's just a virus that kills old people? I don't know. You can start also, Gabriela, if you saw that in Bolivia, like the comments on social media, for instance.
I heard it, but
Yeah.
not towards old people, literally, but towards poor people. Because in Bolivia, the thing is that people that can actually be in quarantine are the privileged and middle class, upper class people. Because the other people do not work in formal work, or they are, they're informal workers. So basically they cannot do it, because otherwise they are not going to eat for that day when they are under a lockdown or under a quarantine. So I heard many comments of people saying like, oh yeah, they deserve it. It's like, yeah, but we are talking about the well-being of the whole population. Corona is something that is not really looking at the race of people or the social class, but still there were this kind of comments where people were saying that, yeah, if you're poor and you cannot do the quarantine, then you're screwed. Like, we don't care. You should try to be into quarantine.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And I think regarding like old people, I cannot speak. This is only my perception in terms of like as a culture. I think it's we are a culture that it's very linked to the whole family. So like parents, grandparents are very, very important. So I don't feel that there is a disconnection with the old people, for example, that they are left in an asylum. Oh no, it's not an asylum, but like a home for elder people, for example. So I think that back home, like there is a bigger connection and this sense of respect, sometimes imposed by our culture, I think, that I don't think that there will be that much disconnection, or people say, let them die, they're the old people. Not saying that's the case all the time. I think this is something that maybe is changing. But so far, I think that, it's more of a cultural structure that we have that maybe will not have that same reaction that in Europe or in the US, for example.
Like in China, the situation,